Hi, I'm Natalie. 3 weeks ago, I collapsed in my kitchen clutching my chest, my heart racing so fast I thought it would explode. The paramedics found me unconscious next to an empty pill bottle, and for 12 terrifying hours, doctors couldn't understand why my heart medication had nearly killed me. What they didn't know, what I didn't know, was that my own sister had been slowly replacing my pills with a deadly cocktail designed to trigger the very attack my medicine was supposed to prevent. But Hannah made one critical mistake. She never suspected that our quiet neighborhood pharmacist, Dr. Marcus Rivera, wasn't just filling prescriptions. He was documenting everything, building a case that would expose not just attempted murder, but a pattern of manipulation so twisted it would shatter everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning my heart almost stopped, I was making Hannah's favorite blueberry pancakes. It was our monthly tradition, something we'd maintained even after she moved back home for nursing school. Every third Saturday, she'd drive over to my downtown Portland loft, complaining about early morning traffic while secretly loving the ritual we'd created. I'd wake up early, hit the farmer's market on Hawthorne for fresh berries, and spend the morning creating the kind of breakfast spread that made her Instagram followers jealous. Hannah had always been the golden child. While I struggled through art school, switching majors twice before settling on graphic design, she sailed through her prerequisites with a perfect GPA and acceptance letters from every nursing program she applied to. Mom never missed an opportunity to remind me how Hannah was following in her footsteps, honoring the family legacy of caring for others. Dad would beam whenever Hannah explained medical procedures at dinner, nodding along as if he understood the complexities of pharmacology she'd mastered in her second year. I never resented it. Hannah deserved the praise. She was brilliant, dedicated, and genuinely passionate about helping people heal. When I was diagnosed with cardiac arrhythmia at 26, a condition that required daily medication to keep my heart beating in proper rhythm, Hannah became my fiercest advocate. She researched my condition obsessively, questioned my cardiologist about treatment options, and even organized my pill schedule into a detailed chart that color-coded dosages and timing. That Saturday morning, as I whisked batter and listened to the coffee maker gurgle, I felt grateful for the stability Hannah brought to my chaotic creative life. My freelance design work kept irregular hours, and I often forgot basic self-care routine. Hannah's medical knowledge had become my safety net. She reminded me to take my medication, scheduled my cardiology appointments, and even drove me to the emergency room the one time I'd had a minor episode 6 months earlier. The apartment filled with the smell of bacon and vanilla. As I prepared our feast, my phone buzzed with Hannah's typical running late text, complete with apologetic emojis and promises to bring coffee from the fancy place downtown. I smiled, adjusting the heat under the pancakes, and reaching for my morning pills from the dispenser Hannah had organized for me. The small white tablets looked identical to the ones I'd been taking for 3 years, but something felt different as I swallowed them with orange juice. The sensation was subtle at first, a flutter in my chest that I dismissed as excitement about seeing my sister. We'd been planning this morning for weeks, ever since she'd mentioned stress about her upcoming clinical rotation. Hannah thrived under pressure, but lately she'd seemed more anxious than usual. She'd been asking pointed questions about my finances, my relationship with David, and whether I'd ever considered updating my will. At the time, her concerns seemed touching, evidence of how much she cared about my well-being. By the time Hannah arrived carrying 2 lattes and wearing the designer scrubs Mom had bought her for clinical training, I was feeling lightheaded. She breezed through the door with her usual energy, kissing my cheek and immediately commenting on how pale I looked. Her nursing instincts kicked in as she felt my forehead and asked about my medication schedule. When I mentioned feeling slightly dizzy, she suggested I might be taking my pills incorrectly and offered to double-check my dosage. Hannah moved through my kitchen with practiced efficiency, setting up our breakfast while simultaneously monitoring my condition. She asked detailed questions about my symptoms, taking mental notes with the kind of clinical precision that made me proud of her developing medical expertise. When I mentioned that my heart felt like it was skipping beats, she suggested we call my cardiologist after breakfast, just to be safe. We ate slowly, Hannah entertaining me with stories from her hospital rotations, while keeping a careful eye on my condition. She described difficult patients and demanding supervisors with the kind of humor that made even medical emergencies sound manageable. Her competence was reassuring. Having a sister in medical school felt like having a personal healthcare advocate, someone who understood the system and could navigate it on my behalf. As we finished eating, Hannah insisted on cleaning up while I rested on the couch. She moved efficiently through my kitchen, washing dishes and organizing my medication area with the kind of systematic approach I'd always admired. She double-checked my pill organizer, counting tablets and making notes in the small notebook she carried for tracking my health information. Her dedication to my care felt overwhelming in the best possible way. The attack began an hour after she left. I was sitting at my computer, working on a logo design for a local coffee shop when my chest tightened like someone was squeezing my ribs with steel bands. The sensation was unlike anything I'd experienced, even during my initial cardiac episodes. My heart hammered against my sternum with violent irregularity, sometimes racing so fast I couldn't count the beats, then stopping for terrifying seconds before lurching back to life. Panic flooded my system as I reached for my phone, fingers trembling too violently to dial. The room spun around me in nauseating circles while sweat poured down my face despite the cool morning air conditioning. I managed to call 911, gasping out my address between waves of chest pain that felt like electric shocks radiating through my torso. The paramedics found me collapsed in the kitchen doorway, unconscious and barely breathing. Later, they told me my heart rate had been fluctuating between dangerous extremes, creating a rhythm so chaotic it couldn't sustain circulation. They administered emergency medications and rushed me to Providence Medical Center, where doctors worked frantically to stabilize what they initially assumed was a massive cardiac event. Hannah arrived at the hospital before I regained consciousness, somehow having heard about my emergency through channels I never understood. She sat beside my bed during those first crucial hours, holding my hand and providing medical history to the attending physician. Her presence comforted the nursing staff, who appreciated having a family member who understood medical terminology and could communicate effectively about my condition. When I finally woke up, Hannah was there with red-rimmed eyes and a relieved smile. She explained that doctors were puzzled by the severity of my attack, especially since my recent cardiological exams had shown stable improvement. My medication levels should have prevented exactly the kind of episode I'd experienced. The medical team was running comprehensive tests to understand what had triggered such a dramatic cardiac event in someone whose condition had been well controlled. Hannah stayed with me through the night, sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair and advocating with nurses for better pain management. She asked intelligent questions about my treatment plan and took detailed notes about medication adjustments the cardiologist recommended. Her dedication felt like exactly the kind of support every patient deserved, and I felt lucky to have such a caring sister managing my medical care. The discharge process took 2 days while doctors adjusted my medication and monitored my heart rhythm. Hannah coordinated with my insurance company, scheduled follow-up appointments, and even picked up my new prescriptions from Rivera Family Pharmacy, the small neighborhood store where I'd been getting medication for years. Marcus Rivera, the pharmacist owner, had always been exceptionally thorough about medication counseling, and Hannah spent nearly an hour discussing my new treatment protocol with him. During the drive home, Hannah seemed unusually quiet. She kept glancing at me with an expression I couldn't interpret, something between concern and calculation. When I asked if she was okay, she brushed off my question and focused on reviewing the discharge instructions. She insisted on staying overnight to monitor my recovery, setting up the guest bedroom and organizing my medication schedule with military precision. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, feeling grateful for Hannah's care, I had no idea she was in my kitchen, carefully replacing my heart medication with pills designed to trigger the very attack that had nearly killed me. I didn't know she'd been planning this for months, researching drug interactions and cardiac triggers with the same dedication she applied to her nursing studies. I couldn't imagine that my brilliant, caring sister saw my condition not as something to heal, but as an opportunity to solve problems I didn't even know existed. The next morning, Hannah prepared my medication with the same loving attention she'd always shown. She handed me the pills with a glass of water and a concerned reminder about taking them exactly as prescribed. She kissed my forehead before leaving for class, promising to check on me later and reminding me to call if I felt any unusual symptom. As she walked out my door, carrying the same designer bag Mom had bought her for clinical rotations, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude for having such a dedicated advocate. Hannah represented everything I admired about healthcare professionals: intelligence, compassion, and unwavering commitment to patient well-being. She was going to make an extraordinary nurse. I had no way of knowing she was already making an extraordinary murderer. The pills she'd given me that morning were a carefully calculated combination of stimulants and cardiac accelerants, designed to create exactly the kind of arrhythmia that would look like a natural progression of my existing condition. Hannah had researched the dosages with scientific precision, creating a cocktail that would trigger cardiac distress severe enough to be life-threatening, but subtle enough to avoid immediate detection. For the next week, I took my medication religiously, trusting Hannah's organizational system and believing I was following proper medical protocol. Each morning brought new symptoms that seemed consistent with post-cardiac event recovery: fatigue, occasional chest discomfort, and a persistent feeling that something wasn't quite right with my heart rhythm. Hannah monitored these symptoms with clinical interest, adjusting my pill schedule and suggesting modifications based on her nursing school knowledge. She visited daily, bringing healthy meals and checking my vital signs with equipment she'd borrowed from school. Her attention felt comprehensive and professional, exactly what any patient would want from a family member with medical training. She documented my progress in a detailed notebook, tracking symptoms and medication effects with the kind of thoroughness that impressed my neighbors and made my parents beam with pride. But Dr. Rivera was watching too, and unlike the rest of my family, he was beginning to notice patterns that didn't make medical sense. Every time Hannah picked up my prescriptions, Dr. Rivera had conducted the standard medication counseling required by pharmacy protocol. But Hannah's questions had been unusual, focusing on drug interactions and cardiac effects that went far beyond normal patient education. She'd asked about medication storage, tablet appearance, and the specific timing required for therapeutic effectiveness. Her inquiries had the precision of someone conducting research rather than someone seeking basic information about a family member's treatment. Dr. Rivera had built his neighborhood pharmacy by paying attention to details other pharmacists missed. He knew his regular customers' medication patterns, recognized when prescriptions seemed inconsistent with documented medical conditions, and maintained relationships with local physicians that allowed him to verify unusual requests. When Hannah began picking up my medications, asking technical questions that seemed more appropriate for a medical professional than a concerned sister, he'd started paying closer attention. The morning I'd had my cardiac emergency, Dr. Rivera had been reviewing my medication history when Hannah called asking about prescription refill procedures. Her timing had struck him as odd, calling about refills for someone who should have had adequate medication supply. When she'd mentioned my hospitalization, he'd felt the first stirring of professional concern about the correlation between my medication schedule and cardiac events. During Hannah's lengthy consultation about my discharge medications, Dr. Rivera had documented her questions in detail. She'd asked about storage temperatures, tablet dissolution rates, and the visual characteristics that distinguish different cardiac medications. Her inquiries had the specificity of someone planning to manipulate medication rather than simply understand treatment protocols. That night, Dr. Rivera had begun his own research into cardiac medication manipulation, discovering how easy it would be for someone with basic medical knowledge to create dangerous drug combinations using commonly available substances. The more he learned about medication-induced cardiac events, the more concerned he became about the pattern of Hannah's questions and my subsequent medical emergency. Dr. Rivera had installed security cameras in his pharmacy years earlier, standard equipment for any business handling controlled substances. But he'd also maintained detailed consultation logs that documented every interaction with customers, including the specific questions they asked and the information they requested. These records, combined with video documentation of Hannah's visits, were creating a timeline that suggested something far more sinister than sisterly concern. As I continued taking the poisoned medication Hannah provided, trusting her medical expertise and grateful for her dedicated care, Dr. Rivera was building a case that would eventually save my life. He was documenting evidence of attempted murder, meticulously recording every detail that would prove Hannah had transformed her nursing education into a weapon designed to kill the sister she'd promised to protect. But first, she had to try again, and this time, she was planning to make sure I wouldn't survive to tell anyone what really happened. The second attack came 3 weeks later, during what should have been the happiest day our family had shared in months. Mom had organized a celebration barbecue for Hannah's acceptance into the accelerated nursing program at Oregon Health Sciences University, an achievement that would put her on track to graduate a full year early. The entire extended family gathered in my parents' backyard in Beaverton, the kind of picture-perfect suburban setting where nothing terrible was supposed to happen. I'd been feeling stronger since my hospital discharge, following my new medication regimen religiously, and attending twice-weekly cardiac rehabilitation sessions. My cardiologist, Dr. Elizabeth Martinez, had expressed cautious optimism about my recovery, noting that my heart rhythm had stabilized remarkably well considering the severity of my recent episode. She'd adjusted my medication dosages based on my body's response, creating what she described as an optimal therapeutic balance. Hannah had been instrumental in managing my recovery process. She attended every medical appointment, taking detailed notes and asking the kind of sophisticated questions that impressed my healthcare team. Dr. Martinez had specifically complimented Hannah's understanding of cardiac pharmacology, mentioning how refreshing it was to work with a family member who could communicate effectively about complex medical concepts. Hannah's dedication to my care had become a source of family pride, with relatives constantly praising her selfless commitment to her sister's health. The morning of the barbecue, Hannah arrived early to help me prepare side dishes for the family gathering. She'd brought fresh ingredients for her famous potato salad, along with a new medication organizer she'd designed specifically for my complex pill schedule. The organizer was color-coded and labeled with precise timing instructions, a system she'd developed based on her clinical rotation experiences. She explained that proper medication management was crucial for maintaining cardiac stability, especially during stressful events like family gathering. As we worked together in my kitchen, Hannah seemed more relaxed than she'd been since my hospitalization. She talked enthusiastically about her upcoming clinical assignments, describing the intensive care rotations that would give her hands-on experience with cardiac patients. Her passion for emergency medicine was evident as she explained advanced life support protocols and the pharmacological interventions used in critical cardiac situations. Her knowledge was impressive, extending far beyond what I'd expected from a second-year nursing student. Hannah insisted on organizing my medication before we left for the barbecue, carefully counting pills and arranging them according to the precise schedule Dr. Martinez had prescribed. She explained the importance of maintaining consistent blood levels of cardiac medications, emphasizing how even minor timing variations could destabilize my heart rhythm. Her attention to detail felt reassuring, evidence of how seriously she took responsibility for my well-being. During the drive to our parents' house, Hannah asked detailed questions about my recent symptoms and energy levels. She wanted to know about any chest discomfort, irregular heartbeats, or episodes of lightheadedness that might indicate medication adjustments were needed. Her clinical assessment felt thorough and professional, the kind of monitoring that made me confident about attending a potentially stressful family event. The barbecue was exactly the kind of celebration our family did best. Dad manned the grill while Mom orchestrated a buffet that could have fed twice as many people. Cousins, aunts, and family friends filled the backyard with laughter and conversation, everyone eager to congratulate Hannah on her academic achievement. She moved through the crowd with gracious confidence, accepting praise while deflecting attention to my recovery progress and the family's collective support during my health crisis. I felt genuinely happy watching Hannah receive the recognition she deserved. Her dedication to nursing school, combined with her selfless care for my medical needs, represented everything our family valued about service and commitment. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Several relatives mentioned how proud they were of Hannah's maturity and compassion, noting how rare it was to find young people so dedicated to caring for others. The praise was well-earned and long overdue. As the afternoon progressed, I began feeling the familiar flutter in my chest that preceded cardiac irregularities. The sensation was subtle at first, easily dismissed as excitement about the family celebration, but gradually, the fluttering intensified into the kind of racing heartbeat that made breathing difficult. I tried to remain calm, remembering Dr. Martinez's advice about managing anxiety-induced symptoms through controlled breathing techniques. Hannah noticed my distress immediately, her nursing training, evident in the way she quickly assessed my condition, without causing alarm among other guests. She guided me to a quiet corner of the yard, checking my pulse and asking specific questions about my symptoms. Her clinical evaluation was swift and thorough, the kind of professional response that reassured everyone present that the situation was under control. But instead of improving with rest and breathing exercises, my condition deteriorated rapidly. My heart rate accelerated to a pace that felt dangerous, accompanied by chest pain that radiated down my left arm. The world began spinning around me in nauseating waves while sweat poured down my face despite the cool evening air. Hannah immediately recognized the severity of my symptoms, calling for someone to bring my emergency medication while simultaneously dialing 9. The paramedics arrived within minutes, finding me unconscious in the backyard while Hannah provided a detailed medical history to guide their treatment decisions. She explained my recent hospitalization, current medication regimen, and the progression of symptoms leading to my collapse. Her ability to communicate effectively with emergency medical personnel impressed everyone present, demonstrating the value of having a family member with healthcare training during medical crises. At the hospital, Hannah remained by my side throughout the emergency evaluation process. She answered questions about my medication compliance, recent dietary changes, and stress levels that might have contributed to this cardiac episode. The emergency room physician praised Hannah's comprehensive knowledge of my medical history, noting how her detailed information was crucial for developing an appropriate treatment plan. This time, the cardiac event was more severe than my initial episode. My heart rhythm was so chaotic that doctors had to use electrical cardioversion to restore normal function, a procedure that required general anesthesia and carried significant risks. Hannah stayed in the waiting room during the procedure, providing updates to our anxious family members and coordinating with my insurance company about treatment authorization. When I woke up in the cardiac intensive care unit, Hannah was there with tear-stained cheeks and a relieved smile. She explained that doctors were concerned about the escalating pattern of my cardiac episodes, especially since my medication levels should have prevented such severe attacks. The medical team was planning comprehensive testing to identify any underlying factors that might be contributing to my deteriorating condition. Dr. Martinez visited later that evening, expressing genuine puzzlement about my case. My recent test results had shown excellent response to medication therapy, with heart rhythm patterns that suggested stable improvement. The severity of this latest episode contradicted all clinical indicators, creating a medical mystery that would require extensive investigation to resolve. She planned to consult with cardiac electrophysiology specialists and possibly adjust my medication regimen based on new diagnostic findings. Hannah took detailed notes during Dr. Martinez's explanation, asking sophisticated questions about treatment alternatives and long-term prognosis. Her engagement with my medical care impressed the hospital staff, who commented on how fortunate I was to have such a knowledgeable advocate managing my healthcare needs. Several nurses mentioned that they wished all families showed such dedication to understanding complex medical conditions. During my 3-day hospital stay, Hannah visited constantly, bringing books and magazines to keep me entertained while monitoring my condition with professional attention. She tracked my vital signs, documented medication times, and even communicated with my graphic design clients to manage work responsibilities during my recovery. Her comprehensive support felt overwhelming in the best possible way, evidence of the kind of unconditional love that made family relationships precious. The discharge process was more complex this time, involving multiple specialists and an elaborate medication protocol designed to prevent future cardiac events. Hannah coordinated every aspect of my care transition, scheduling follow-up appointments and organizing home health services to monitor my recovery progress. She even researched dietary modifications and exercise programs that might support my cardiac rehabilitation. Rivera filled my new prescriptions personally, spending considerable time reviewing each medication with Hannah and explaining potential side effects or interactions. Their consultation lasted nearly 2 hours, covering topics that seemed more appropriate for advanced medical training than basic patient education. Hannah's questions demonstrated sophisticated understanding of cardiac pharmacology, impressing Dr. Rivera with her clinical knowledge and dedication to my well-being. But Dr. Rivera's admiration was mixed with growing concern about patterns he was observing in Hannah's behavior and my medical emergency. The timing of my cardiac events seemed to correlate with specific medication changes that Hannah had suggested or implemented. Her questions about drug interactions and dosage modifications were more detailed than necessary for someone simply supporting a family member's healthcare needs. During their lengthy consultation, Dr. Rivera had carefully documented Hannah's inquiries about medication storage, tablet appearance, and the physiological effects of cardiac drugs. Her interest in these topics extended beyond normal patient education, suggesting someone conducting research rather than seeking basic information. The specificity of her questions raised professional concerns about the correlation between her involvement in my care and my deteriorating medical condition. After Hannah left the pharmacy, Dr. Rivera reviewed my complete medication history and the timeline of my cardiac event. The pattern was subtle but disturbing. Each major episode had occurred within hours of medication changes that Hannah had suggested or personally managed. Her presence at every medical appointment, combined with her detailed knowledge of my treatment protocols, had given her unprecedented access to my healthcare decisions. That evening, Dr. Rivera began researching cardiac medication tampering, discovering how easy it would be for someone with basic medical knowledge to create life-threatening drug combinations using commonly available substances. The internet contained detailed information about drugs that could mimic cardiac emergencies, create arrhythmias, or interfere with prescribed medications in ways that would be difficult to detect through standard hospital testing. The more Dr. Rivera learned about medication-induced cardiac events, the more concerned he became about Hannah's level of access to my healthcare management. She had positioned herself as my primary medical advocate, attending appointments and managing medications in ways that gave her complete control over my treatment compliance. If someone wanted to harm me through pharmaceutical manipulation, they couldn't have asked for better positioning than Hannah had achieved. Rivera's security cameras had recorded every interaction with Hannah, documenting her questions and the specific information she'd requested about cardiac medication. Combined with his detailed consultation logs, these records were creating a timeline that suggested systematic research into medication tampering rather than genuine concern for patient education. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling enough to warrant serious investigation. Meanwhile, I was recovering at home, grateful for Hannah's continued dedication to my medical care. She visited daily, preparing healthy meals and monitoring my condition with clinical precision. Her knowledge of cardiac rehabilitation protocols was impressive, incorporating evidence-based strategies for supporting heart health through nutrition, exercise, and stress management. Every aspect of her care felt professionally competent and personally devoted. Hannah had also taken responsibility for managing my medication schedule, using the sophisticated organizer she'd designed to ensure perfect compliance with Dr. Martinez's prescription. She explained the importance of maintaining consistent blood levels of cardiac drugs, emphasizing how even minor variations in timing could destabilize my heart rhythm. Her attention to pharmaceutical details felt reassuring, evidence of how seriously she took my medical needs. But the pills Hannah was giving me weren't the ones Dr. Rivera had dispensed. She had carefully replaced my prescribed cardiac medications with a combination of stimulants and arrhythmia-inducing substances, creating a pharmaceutical cocktail designed to trigger the very episodes my real medication was supposed to prevent. Her nursing education had provided the knowledge necessary to create drug combinations that would cause life-threatening cardiac events, while appearing to be natural progression of my existing condition. Each morning, Hannah prepared my medication with loving attention, explaining the purpose of each pill and reminding me about proper timing for optimal therapeutic effectiveness. She documented my medication compliance in a detailed log that she shared with Dr. Martinez during appointments, demonstrating her commitment to supporting my recovery through meticulous pharmaceutical management. Her dedication impressed everyone involved in my healthcare, from family members to medical professionals. The poisoned medications were having their intended effect. My heart rhythm was becoming increasingly unstable despite apparent compliance with prescribed therapy. I experienced daily episodes of chest discomfort, irregular heartbeats, and fatigue that seemed consistent with progressive cardiac disease. Hannah monitored these symptoms with clinical interest, adjusting my medication schedule and suggesting modifications based on her nursing school knowledge. 3 weeks after my second hospitalization, Hannah suggested I needed to update my will and review my life insurance policy. Her reasoning seemed practical. Given my deteriorating cardiac condition, it was important to ensure proper legal and financial documentation in case of medical emergency. She offered to help research estate planning attorneys and coordinate meetings to address these important but overwhelming administrative tasks. Her concern about my legal affairs felt touching, evidence of how deeply she cared about protecting my interest during a vulnerable time. Hannah had always been the organized one in our family, the person who thought ahead and planned for contingencies that others overlooked. Her suggestion about estate planning seemed like another example of her thoughtful attention to details that could matter during medical crises. But Hannah's interest in my will and insurance policies had nothing to do with protecting my interests. She needed to ensure that her eventual inheritance would be substantial enough to justify the risks she was taking with these elaborate murder attempts. Her careful research into my financial affairs was part of a calculated plan to eliminate me while maximizing her personal benefit from my death. As I struggled with declining health and increasing medical expenses, Hannah was already spending money she expected to inherit. She had purchased expensive equipment for nursing school, upgraded her car, and even put a deposit on a luxury apartment near the hospital where she planned to work after graduation. Her financial planning assumed my death would occur before I discovered her pharmaceutical manipulation, or became too expensive to maintain through repeated hospitalizations. Dr. Rivera was watching all of this unfold with growing alarm and determination to expose Hannah's deadly deception. His documentation was becoming more comprehensive with each of Hannah's pharmacy visits, building a case that would eventually save my life while revealing the shocking truth about how medical knowledge could be transformed into a weapon against the very people it was supposed to protect. The third attempt on my life came disguised as a romantic dinner date with David, my boyfriend of 2 years, who had been increasingly worried about my deteriorating health. Hannah had suggested the evening out, arguing that I needed emotional support and normalcy to aid my cardiac recovery. She had even recommended the restaurant, a quiet Italian place downtown where the dim lighting and intimate atmosphere would create the perfect setting for David to propose with the ring. I wasn't supposed to know he'd purchased. David had confided in Hannah about his proposal plans weeks earlier, seeking her medical opinion about whether the excitement might trigger another cardiac episode. Hannah had enthusiastically supported the idea, explaining that positive emotional experiences could actually benefit heart health by reducing stress hormones and promoting psychological well-being. She had offered to coordinate my medication schedule around the special evening, ensuring that my cardiac drugs would be optimally effective during any emotional excitement. The morning of our dinner date, Hannah arrived early to help me prepare for what she described as a potentially life-changing evening. She had brought a new dress she'd purchased specifically for the occasion, along with jewelry and makeup that would create the perfect romantic look. Her excitement about David's proposal seemed genuine, filled with the kind of sisterly enthusiasm that made me feel grateful for her emotional support during such a challenging time. Hannah spent considerable time organizing my medication for the evening, explaining that the combination of dinner, wine, and emotional excitement could affect how my cardiac drugs were absorbed and metabolized. She prepared a special pill organizer with precisely timed doses that would maintain therapeutic blood levels throughout the night. Her attention to pharmaceutical details felt reassuring, evidence of how seriously she took the intersection of my medical needs and social activity. As I got ready for dinner, Hannah monitored my condition carefully, checking my heart rate and asking about any symptoms that might indicate instability. She seemed particularly interested in my energy levels and emotional state, taking notes about factors that might influence my cardiac response to evening activity. Her clinical assessment felt thorough and caring, the kind of monitoring that gave me confidence about participating in potentially stressful social situations. David arrived looking nervous and excited, carrying flowers and wearing the suit Hannah had helped him select for the special occasion. She had coached him about recognizing signs of cardiac distress and responding appropriately if I experienced any medical problems during dinner. Her preparation felt comprehensive, covering everything from restaurant locations near hospitals to specific phrases he should use when calling emergency services. During the drive to the restaurant, I began feeling the familiar flutter in my chest that had become an unwelcome companion since my cardiac episodes began. The sensation was mild at first, easily attributed to excitement about spending time with David and anticipation about whatever surprise he had planned. But gradually, the fluttering intensified into irregular heartbeats that made concentrating on conversation difficult. David noticed my distress immediately, his concern evident in the way he kept glancing at me while navigating downtown traffic. When I mentioned feeling lightheaded, he offered to cancel dinner and return home, but I insisted we continue with our plan. Hannah had specifically prepared my medication to handle emotional excitement, and I trusted her clinical judgment about my ability to participate in normal social activities. The restaurant was exactly as Hannah had described, intimate, quiet, and perfectly arranged for romantic occasions. David had reserved a corner table that provided privacy while maintaining easy access to exits in case medical problems arose. His thoughtfulness about accommodating my health concerns felt touching, evidence of how much he cared about my well-being, despite the challenges my cardiac condition had created for our relationship. We ordered dinner and wine, David seeming increasingly nervous as the evening progressed. His anxiety was endearing rather than concerning, clearly related to his proposal plans rather than worry about my medical condition. Hannah had assured him that controlled excitement would be beneficial for my cardiac recovery, and I felt grateful for her encouraging him to maintain normal relationship milestones despite my health challenges. But as we waited for our appetizers, my heart rate began accelerating beyond the mild excitement I'd experienced earlier. The racing heartbeats were accompanied by chest pressure that felt different from my previous episodes, more intense and accompanied by nausea that made eating impossible. I tried to remain calm, remembering Hannah's advice about managing anxiety through controlled breathing, but my symptoms continued worsening despite my efforts. David recognized the severity of my condition immediately, abandoning his proposal plans to focus on my medical emergency. He helped me to the restaurant bathroom, where I collapsed against the sink while my heart hammered against my ribs with violent irregularity. The world spun around me in nauseating circles as consciousness faded in and out, leaving me terrified and disoriented. The restaurant manager called 911 while David provided basic information about my cardiac condition and recent hospitalizations. He followed the emergency protocols Hannah had taught him, staying calm and communicating effectively with paramedics about my symptoms and medical history. His response was exactly what any cardiac patient would want from a supportive partner during a life-threatening emergency. This time, the cardiac event was so severe that paramedics had to perform advanced life support procedures in the restaurant before I was stable enough for transport to the hospital. My heart had developed a rhythm so chaotic that it couldn't maintain circulation, requiring immediate pharmacological intervention to prevent cardiac arrest. The emergency medical team worked frantically to stabilize my condition while David provided detailed information about my medications and recent medical treatments. Hannah met us at the emergency room, having somehow learned about my crisis through channels that seemed impossibly fast. She arrived before David and I reached the hospital, carrying my complete medical records and a detailed list of current medications that she'd prepared for exactly this kind of emergency. Her presence immediately reassured the medical staff, who appreciated having a knowledgeable family member available to provide comprehensive patient history. The emergency room physician was genuinely alarmed by the escalating pattern of my cardiac episodes, especially considering my apparent compliance with prescribed medication therapy. My case was becoming a medical mystery that challenged standard treatment protocols and suggested underlying factors that hadn't been identified through conventional diagnostic testing. The medical team decided to consult with cardiac electrophysiology specialists and possibly transfer me to a facility with more advanced cardiac care capability. During my emergency evaluation, Hannah provided detailed information about my medication compliance, dietary habits, and stress levels that might have contributed to this latest crisis. She answered questions with clinical precision, demonstrating comprehensive understanding of my medical condition and treatment history. The emergency medical staff praised her knowledge and preparation, noting how valuable it was to have such an informed advocate during complex cardiac emergency. Rivera was in the emergency room that night, having volunteered to provide pharmaceutical consultation for the hospital's evening shift. When he saw Hannah arrive with my medical records, seemingly having anticipated my emergency before it was reported through official channels, his professional concerns about her involvement in my care intensified into active suspicion about the correlation between her presence and my deteriorating condition. Rivera approached the medical team treating my case, offering to review my medication history and provide insight into potential pharmaceutical factors that might be contributing to my escalating cardiac episode. His expertise in clinical pharmacology was valuable for understanding how drug interactions, or compliance issues, might be affecting my treatment outcomes. The emergency physician welcomed his consultation, especially given the puzzling nature of my case. As Dr. Rivera reviewed my medication records, he noticed discrepancies between the prescriptions he had dispensed and the pills Hannah claimed I was taking. The doses and timing she described didn't match his pharmacy records, suggesting either documentation errors or deliberate misrepresentation of my pharmaceutical therapy. His concerns about medication tampering, which had been building for weeks, suddenly crystallized into urgent suspicion about Hannah's role in my medical emergencies. Dr. Rivera quietly requested additional blood tests that would detect substances not typically included in standard cardiac emergency protocols. He was looking for evidence of stimulants, drug interactions, or foreign substances that might explain the severity and timing of my cardiac episodes. These specialized tests required specific laboratory techniques and could take several hours to process, but they might provide crucial information about whether my condition was truly medical or potentially criminal in nature. While waiting for test results, Dr. Rivera began documenting every detail of Hannah's behavior and statements during my emergency treatment. Her knowledge of my condition was impressively comprehensive, but her emotional responses seemed more calculated than genuinely distressed. She asked specific questions about my prognosis and treatment protocols that suggested professional interest rather than personal concern about my survival. Hannah had positioned herself as my primary medical advocate, controlling access to my healthcare information and managing communication between medical professionals and family members. Her nursing education gave her credibility with hospital staff, who assumed her involvement was purely supportive rather than potentially harmful. But Dr. Rivera was beginning to recognize patterns that suggested systematic manipulation rather than dedicated caregiving. The specialized blood tests Dr. Rivera had requested revealed traces of substances that had no therapeutic purpose in cardiac treatment, but could definitely trigger life-threatening arrhythmia. The concentrations were subtle enough to avoid detection through standard emergency testing, but significant enough to cause the kind of cardiac chaos I'd been experiencing. These findings suggested deliberate pharmaceutical manipulation rather than natural disease progression or medication compliance problems. Rivera immediately contacted hospital security and requested a private consultation with the attending physician about potential criminal activity related to my case. His evidence was still circumstantial, but the blood test results combined with his documented observations of Hannah's behavior created a compelling case for investigating medication tampering. The situation had evolved from medical emergency to potential attempted murder, requiring law enforcement involvement and protective measures for my safety. Meanwhile, I was unconscious in the cardiac intensive care unit, unaware that my sister's loving care had been systematic poisoning designed to kill me while appearing to be natural progression of my existing medical condition. Hannah sat beside my bed, holding my hand and providing updates to anxious family members about my critical condition. Her devotion appeared touching and genuine to everyone present, including medical staff who continued praising her commitment to my well-being. But Hannah was actually calculating whether this attempt had been sufficient to complete her murderous plan, or whether she would need to try again with more aggressive pharmaceutical intervention. Her nursing education had provided detailed knowledge about lethal drug combinations, and she was prepared to escalate her methods if I survived this latest episode. My death needed to appear natural enough to avoid autopsy investigation, but certain enough to eliminate the financial burden I represented and secure her inheritance. David remained in the waiting room throughout the night, devastated by what appeared to be my rapidly deteriorating cardiac condition and confused about how someone so young could experience such severe medical problems. Hannah comforted him with professional explanations about cardiac disease progression, assuring him that my condition wasn't his fault and that medical emergencies were unpredictable even with optimal treatment compliance. Rivera was using this time to build a comprehensive case file that documented every aspect of Hannah's involvement in my healthcare management. His pharmacy records, security camera footage, and consultation logs were creating a timeline that clearly demonstrated her systematic research into cardiac medication tampering. Combined with the blood test evidence of deliberate poisoning, his documentation would provide law enforcement with everything necessary to pursue criminal charges. The next morning brought a conversation that would change everything. Rivera requested a private meeting with me, David, and hospital security to discuss what he described as serious concerns about my medical treatment. His expression was grave as he explained that my cardiac episodes might not be related to natural disease progression, but could potentially involve deliberate pharmaceutical manipulation by someone with access to my medication. Rivera revealed his suspicions about medication tampering. My world tilted on its axis in a way that had nothing to do with cardiac arrhythmia and everything to do with the shattering realization that someone I trusted completely had been systematically trying to murder me. David's face went pale as Dr. Rivera explained the blood test results, the timeline of my episodes, and the evidence he'd been quietly gathering about Hannah's suspicious behavior and pharmaceutical knowledge. Hospital security immediately implemented protective measures for my safety while Portland police detectives were contacted to investigate what had become a potential attempted murder case. Rivera provided his comprehensive documentation, including pharmacy records, security camera footage, and detailed logs of Hannah's questions about cardiac medications and drug interactions. The evidence painted a disturbing picture of premeditated poisoning disguised as loving medical care. Detective Sarah Chen arrived within hours, bringing forensic specialists and a warrant to search my apartment for evidence of medication tampering. They found Hannah's sophisticated pill organizers, along with traces of the same substances Dr. Rivera's blood tests had detected. Hidden in my kitchen cabinet, investigators discovered a small collection of pills that appeared identical to my prescribed cardiac medication, but contained completely different pharmaceutical compounds designed to trigger life-threatening arrhythmia. The search also revealed Hannah's research materials, carefully hidden but not destroyed. She had printed detailed information about cardiac drug interactions, lethal dosages, and methods for creating untraceable pharmaceutical combinations. Her nursing textbooks contained highlighted sections about emergency cardiac protocols, with handwritten notes about timing and dosages that correlated precisely with my medical episodes. The evidence demonstrated systematic planning rather than impulsive criminal behavior. Detective Chen interviewed David extensively about Hannah's involvement in my healthcare management and her access to my medications. His testimony revealed how Hannah had positioned herself as my primary medical advocate, attending every appointment and controlling all pharmaceutical decisions. She had convinced everyone, including medical professionals, that her involvement was purely supportive rather than potentially harmful to my well-being. While investigators processed evidence from my apartment, I remained in protective custody at the hospital, trying to comprehend the magnitude of Hannah's betrayal. The woman who had held my hand during cardiac emergencies, who had researched my condition obsessively and who had earned universal praise for her dedication to my care, had actually been the source of every life-threatening episode I'd experienced. Her medical knowledge hadn't been used to heal me but to create a slow, painful death that would appear natural. The psychological impact was almost as devastating as the physical poison. Every moment of gratitude I'd felt for Hannah's care, every instance of family pride in her medical dedication, and every time I'd trusted her with my life had actually been opportunities for her to continue her murder attempt. She had transformed the most intimate aspects of healthcare into weapons against the person she was supposed to protect. Dr. Rivera's documentation proved that Hannah had been conducting sophisticated research into my financial affairs alongside her pharmaceutical manipulation. She had accessed my bank accounts, insurance policies, and investment portfolios through her role as my medical advocate. Her interest in my will and estate planning hadn't been protective but calculated, designed to maximize her inheritance while minimizing the time required to achieve my death. Detective Chen's investigation revealed that Hannah had been struggling financially despite her academic success and family support. Nursing school expenses, combined with her expensive lifestyle choices, had created debt that she couldn't manage through conventional means. My life insurance policy and potential inheritance represented a solution to her financial problems, but only if I died before discovering her deception or becoming too expensive to maintain through repeated hospitalization. The motive was brutally simple: Hannah needed money, and my death would provide it while eliminating the ongoing financial burden of my medical care. Her nursing education had given her the knowledge necessary to commit murder through pharmaceutical manipulation, while her position as my loving sister provided perfect cover for systematic poisoning. She had calculated that my death would be attributed to natural disease progression rather than criminal activity. When detectives arrested Hannah at nursing school, she initially maintained her innocence with the same confident competence she'd displayed throughout my medical crises. She insisted that she had only been trying to help me, that her pharmaceutical knowledge was purely supportive, and that any evidence of medication tampering was the result of my own compliance problems rather than deliberate sabotage. Her performance was convincing enough that several classmates and instructors initially defended her character, but confronted with Dr. Rivera's comprehensive evidence, including security camera footage of her researching cardiac drug interactions and blood test results proving deliberate poisoning, Hannah's facade finally cracked. The same clinical precision she'd used to plan my murder became evident in her confession, as she methodically explained exactly how she'd researched lethal drug combinations and implemented her systematic poisoning protocol. Hannah's confession revealed the depth of her planning and the calculating nature of her attempts on my life. She had begun researching cardiac medication tampering months before my first episode, using her nursing school resources to identify pharmaceutical combinations that would create life-threatening emergencies while avoiding detection through standard medical testing. Her academic success had provided access to medical literature and laboratory facilities that supported her criminal research. She admitted to replacing my prescribed medications with carefully crafted combinations of stimulants and cardiac destabilizers, timing the administration to create maximum medical chaos while maintaining plausible deniability about natural disease progression. Her knowledge of emergency medical protocols had allowed her to present herself as a helpful medical advocate, while actually being the source of every crisis she was supposedly helping to manage. The confession also revealed Hannah's financial motivations and her cold calculation about the costs and benefits of my continued existence. She had researched my insurance coverage, medical expenses, and inheritance potential with the same systematic attention she'd applied to pharmaceutical manipulation. My death would solve her financial problems while eliminating what she viewed as an ongoing burden on family resources. Perhaps most chilling was Hannah's lack of genuine remorse about her actions. She expressed regret about getting caught rather than guilt about attempting to murder her sister. Her primary concern seemed to be the impact on her nursing career and academic standing, rather than the physical and emotional trauma she had inflicted through months of systematic poisoning attempts. The evidence against Hannah was overwhelming and undeniable. Dr. Rivera's documentation, combined with forensic analysis of the tampered medications and Hannah's own confession, created an airtight case for attempted murder through pharmaceutical manipulation. The district attorney's office immediately filed formal charges, including multiple counts of attempted murder, medication tampering, and financial fraud related to her access to my insurance and medical account. The news of Hannah's arrest sent shockwaves through our family and the nursing school community. Everyone who had praised her dedication to my medical care struggled to reconcile their admiration with the reality of her systematic murder attempt. The same knowledge and compassion that had impressed medical professionals had actually been tools for implementing a carefully planned assassination disguised as loving healthcare advocacy. David was devastated by the revelation that our romantic dinner had been orchestrated as another opportunity for Hannah to poison me, potentially during what should have been our engagement celebration. His proposal plans, which Hannah had encouraged and supported, would have created the perfect emotional cover for triggering a fatal cardiac episode that would be attributed to excitement rather than pharmaceutical manipulation. My parents were destroyed by the evidence of Hannah's betrayal, struggling to understand how their daughter could have transformed her medical education into a weapon against her own family. The pride they'd felt about her nursing achievements was replaced by horror at how she'd perverted healing knowledge for murderous purposes. Their grief for the daughter they thought they knew was complicated by relief that her plot had been discovered before she succeeded. But the most profound impact was on my own understanding of trust, family loyalty, and the vulnerability that comes with depending on others for medical care. Hannah had weaponized my cardiac condition, transforming a manageable health challenge into a life-threatening crisis through deliberate pharmaceutical sabotage. She had turned the most intimate aspects of healthcare into opportunities for attempted murder. The physical recovery from months of poisoning would take time, but the psychological healing from such a fundamental betrayal would require years of therapy and careful relationship building. Every future medical appointment, every prescription medication, and every gesture of family support would be filtered through the knowledge that the person I'd trusted most had tried repeatedly to kill me. The trial began 6 months later, with Dr. Rivera serving as the prosecution's primary witness against Hannah's systematic attempt to murder me through pharmaceutical manipulation. His testimony was methodical and devastating, walking the jury through months of documentation that clearly demonstrated how Hannah had transformed her nursing education into a weapon designed to create fatal cardiac episodes while maintaining plausible medical cover. The courtroom was packed with nursing students, medical professionals, and family members struggling to understand how someone dedicated to healing could pervert that knowledge for murderous purposes. Rivera's evidence included security camera footage, detailed consultation logs, blood test results, and forensic analysis of the tampered medications Hannah had used in her repeated attempts on my life. Hannah's defense attorney attempted to argue that her actions were misguided attempts to help rather than deliberate murder attempts, but the evidence was too comprehensive and her confession too detailed to support claims of innocent intention. The prosecution demonstrated systematic planning, financial motivation, and calculated execution of a murder plot that had nearly succeeded multiple times before Dr. Rivera's intervention exposed the truth. Expert testimony from cardiac specialists explained how the pharmaceutical combinations Hannah had created were specifically designed to trigger life-threatening arrhythmias while appearing to be natural progression of existing heart disease. Her knowledge of cardiac pharmacology had allowed her to select drugs that would cause maximum medical chaos while avoiding detection through standard emergency testing protocol. The financial evidence was equally damning, revealing Hannah's systematic research into my insurance policies, inheritance potential, and medical expenses alongside her pharmaceutical manipulation. She had accessed my financial accounts through her role as medical advocate, calculating the costs and benefits of my continued existence with chilling precision. My testimony was the most difficult part of the trial, forcing me to relive months of systematic poisoning while describing the profound betrayal of trusting someone completely with my medical care, only to discover they were using that trust to slowly murder. The physical trauma of repeated cardiac episodes was compounded by the psychological devastation of realizing that every gesture of Hannah's medical concern had actually been an opportunity for assassination. David testified about Hannah's encouragement of our relationship milestones, including her enthusiasm about proposal plans that would have provided perfect emotional cover for triggering a fatal cardiac episode during what should have been our happiest moment. Her manipulation extended beyond pharmaceutical sabotage to orchestrating social situations that would maximize the effectiveness of her poisoning attempt. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges, including attempted murder, medication tampering, fraud, and conspiracy. The evidence was so overwhelming that even Hannah's defense team seemed relieved when the trial concluded. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in prison without possibility of parole, noting the particularly heinous nature of using medical knowledge to betray family trust. Hannah showed no emotion during sentencing, maintaining the same clinical detachment she'd displayed throughout her murder attempt. Her lack of genuine remorse reinforced the judge's decision to impose the maximum sentence, emphasizing the need to protect society from someone willing to weaponize healthcare knowledge for personal gain. The aftermath of the trial brought a complex mixture of justice, relief, and ongoing trauma that would require years to fully process. While Hannah's conviction provided legal closure, the psychological impact of her betrayal continued affecting every aspect of my recovery and relationship building. Trusting medical professionals, accepting family support, and managing my legitimate cardiac condition all became complicated by the knowledge of how easily healthcare could be weaponized. Rivera became a hero in the medical community, praised for his vigilance in recognizing suspicious patterns and his courage in investigating potential criminal activity, despite the risks to his professional relationship. His documentation had saved my life while exposing a type of medical abuse that was rarely detected or prosecuted. Pharmacy schools began using his case as an example of professional responsibility and the importance of monitoring patient safety beyond standard protocol. The nursing school implemented new protocols for monitoring students who demonstrated unusual interest in pharmaceutical interactions or questioned medication effects beyond normal educational requirements. Hannah's case became a cautionary tale about how medical knowledge could be perverted for criminal purposes, leading to enhanced screening procedures and ethical training programs designed to identify potential warning signs before students gained access to vulnerable patients. My physical recovery from months of systematic poisoning was gradual but steady once Hannah's pharmaceutical manipulation ended, and I began receiving proper cardiac treatment. Martinez worked closely with toxicology specialists to understand how the various stimulants and cardiac destabilizers had affected my heart function, developing a rehabilitation protocol that addressed both the underlying arrhythmia condition and the damage caused by deliberate pharmaceutical abuse. The legitimate cardiac condition that Hannah had weaponized proved to be far less severe than her poisoning had made it appear. With proper medication and monitoring, my heart rhythm stabilized remarkably well, demonstrating that most of my previous medical crises had been artificially induced rather than naturally occurring. The difference between authentic medical management and systematic sabotage became clear as my energy levels improved and cardiac episodes ceased entirely. But the psychological healing proved far more complex than physical recovery. Every medication required careful verification through multiple sources, every medical appointment needed independent confirmation, and every family interaction carried the shadow of Hannah's betrayal. The simple act of taking prescribed pills, which most people perform without conscious thought, became a source of anxiety that required months of therapy to manage effectively. David and I worked through the trauma together, attending counseling sessions that helped us understand how Hannah's manipulation had affected not just my health, but our entire relationship dynamic. Her encouragement of our romantic milestones had been calculated to create opportunities for more dramatic poisoning attempts, transforming what should have been joyful moments into weapons for attempted murder. Processing this level of betrayal required professional guidance and considerable time. The engagement that Hannah had tried to turn into a murder opportunity finally happened 6 months after her conviction, in Dr. Rivera's pharmacy, surrounded by the very medication bottles that had provided evidence of her crime. David proposed with the ring he'd carried that terrible night at the restaurant, but this time the setting was filled with people who had worked to save my life rather than end it. Dr. Rivera served as our witness, standing beside the security cameras that had documented Hannah's criminal risk. Our wedding planning became an exercise in creating new family traditions that didn't carry the contamination of Hannah's presence. Every decision required careful consideration of how to honor genuine relationships, while acknowledging the permanent absence of someone who had betrayed family trust so fundamentally. My parents struggled with grief for the daughter they thought they knew while celebrating the life she had tried to destroy. Rivera expanded his pharmacy's security and documentation protocols, installing additional cameras and implementing consultation logging systems that other pharmacists began adopting as industry best practices. His experience with Hannah's case demonstrated how pharmaceutical manipulation could occur even in seemingly routine clinical interactions, leading to enhanced training programs for detecting suspicious medication requests or unusual patient behaviors. The case attracted national attention from medical professionals, law enforcement agencies, and family advocacy groups interested in understanding how medical knowledge could be weaponized within trusted relationships. Hannah's systematic approach to pharmaceutical murder represented a new category of domestic violence that required specialized detection and prevention strategies. I began speaking at medical conferences about my experience, helping healthcare providers recognize warning signs of medication tampering and understand how perpetrators might exploit medical advocacy roles to gain access to vulnerable patients. These presentations were emotionally challenging, but felt necessary for preventing similar crimes against other families dealing with chronic medical conditions. The financial investigation revealed that Hannah's debts were even more extensive than initially discovered, including credit card balances, student loans, and gambling losses that she had hidden from family members. My life insurance policy would have covered her financial obligations while providing substantial additional funds for the lifestyle she wanted to maintain after graduation. Her calculation had been coldly precise. My death was worth more than my life. My parents underwent their own therapy process, working through guilt about missing warning signs and grief about losing the daughter they thought they were raising. Hannah's academic success and apparent dedication to family had masked a calculating personality that viewed relationships as opportunities for manipulation rather than sources of genuine connection. Their pride in her nursing achievements had blinded them to the criminal research she was conducting using those same educational resources. The extended family struggled with divided loyalties, some members initially refusing to believe Hannah could be capable of such systematic cruelty. The evidence was overwhelming, but emotional acceptance took longer than legal conviction. Family gatherings became complicated by Hannah's absence and the knowledge of what she had attempted, requiring careful navigation of grief, anger, and betrayal. David's proposal had included a promise that we would create a family built on transparency, trust, and genuine care rather than the calculated manipulation that had characterized Hannah's relationship. Our marriage planning involved extensive discussions about medical advocacy, financial independence, and the safeguards necessary to protect against future betrayal by people in positions of trust. The neighborhood where Dr. Rivera's pharmacy was located embraced him as a local hero, with residents expressing gratitude for his vigilance in protecting community members from a type of crime they hadn't known existed. His willingness to investigate suspicious patterns and document evidence had prevented a murder while exposing pharmaceutical manipulation techniques that could threaten anyone with chronic medical conditions. Hannah's former nursing classmates were required to undergo additional screening and ethical training before completing their clinical rotations, ensuring that her case didn't represent a broader problem within the medical education system. Several students reported feeling violated by association with someone who had perverted shared educational experiences for criminal purposes. The legal precedent set by Hannah's conviction influenced how other cases of medical abuse would be investigated and prosecuted, establishing clear guidelines for recognizing pharmaceutical manipulation and building evidence for criminal charges. Law enforcement agencies developed new protocols for collaborating with healthcare providers when medication tampering was suspected. My cardiac rehabilitation program became a model for supporting patients who had experienced medical abuse, incorporating psychological counseling alongside physical therapy to address the complex trauma of having trusted healthcare relationships violated. The intersection of medical recovery and criminal victimization required specialized therapeutic approaches that few programs had previously developed. Martinez, my cardiologist, implemented new verification procedures for patients whose medication management involved family members or caregivers, recognizing that Hannah's case demonstrated how medical advocacy roles could be exploited for harmful purposes. These protocols balanced patient autonomy with protective measures against potential pharmaceutical abuse. The insurance investigation revealed that Hannah had been researching policy terms and beneficiary procedures with the same systematic attention she'd applied to cardiac drug interaction. Her planning had extended far beyond the actual murder attempts to include the financial and legal aftermath of my death, demonstrating premeditation that supported the prosecution's case for maximum sentencing. 1 year after Hannah's conviction, I testified before a state legislative committee considering new laws about medication tampering and medical abuse within families. The legal framework for prosecuting pharmaceutical manipulation was inadequate for addressing the sophistication of Hannah's methods, requiring enhanced penalties and investigative resources for detecting this type of crime. The pharmacy where Dr. Rivera worked became a training site for other pharmacists, learning to recognize suspicious medication requests and document evidence of potential tampering. His case demonstrated how community pharmacists could serve as crucial safeguards against medical abuse, particularly for patients with chronic conditions requiring complex medication regimens. My relationship with my parents slowly healed as we worked through family therapy sessions designed to address the trauma of Hannah's betrayal while rebuilding trust and communication patterns. Their grief for the daughter they thought they knew complicated their relief about my survival, requiring professional guidance to navigate the complex emotions surrounding family loyalty and criminal behavior. The civil lawsuit against Hannah's estate recovered some of the medical expenses and financial damages caused by her systematic poisoning, though the monetary compensation was insignificant compared to the physical and emotional trauma she had inflicted. The legal process provided additional closure while ensuring that any future assets Hannah might acquire would remain subject to restitution requirements. David and I honeymooned in a location chosen specifically for its excellent medical facilities and pharmaceutical regulations, acknowledging that my cardiac condition would always require careful management even though Hannah's interference had ended. The trip represented both celebration of our survival and commitment to building a future that honored the lessons learned from surviving systematic betrayal. 2 years after the trial, I received a letter from Hannah in prison requesting reconciliation and expressing what she claimed was genuine remorse for her action. The letter demonstrated the same manipulative language patterns that had characterized her behavior before her crimes were exposed, suggesting that imprisonment had not fundamentally changed her personality or moral reason. I chose not to respond to Hannah's correspondence, recognizing that any contact would likely be another attempt at manipulation rather than authentic accountability. The decision to maintain complete separation was difficult but necessary for protecting my continued healing and preventing her from gaining any new access to my emotional or physical well-being. The support groups I attended for survivors of family violence included other people who had experienced medical abuse, though none had encountered the level of systematic pharmaceutical manipulation that Hannah had implemented. These connections provided valuable perspective on the broader patterns of how trusted relationships could be weaponized for harmful purposes. Rivera continued serving as an expert witness in other cases involving suspected medication tampering, helping law enforcement agencies and medical professionals recognize similar patterns of pharmaceutical abuse. His documentation methods became standard practice recommendations for pharmacists working with patients who had complex medication regimens managed by family members or caregivers. The nursing school that Hannah had attended implemented her case study into their ethics curriculum, using her systematic approach to pharmaceutical murder as an example of how medical knowledge could be perverted for criminal purposes. Students were required to analyze the warning signs that had been missed and the institutional safeguards that might have prevented her from accessing the information necessary for planning systematic poison. My cardiac condition remained stable with proper medication and regular monitoring, proving that Hannah's poisoning had been responsible for the majority of medical crises I had experienced. The contrast between authentic medical management and systematic sabotage became a powerful reminder of how trust and betrayal could literally be matters of life and death in healthcare relations. The financial counseling David and I received helped us establish completely independent accounts and decision-making processes that couldn't be compromised by future family manipulation. Hannah's access to my financial information through her medical advocacy role had demonstrated how easily financial abuse could accompany medical sabotage, requiring comprehensive protective measures. 3 years after Hannah's imprisonment, I began writing a book about my experience with systematic pharmaceutical poisoning, hoping to help other families recognize warning signs and protect themselves against similar crimes. The writing process was therapeutic while serving the practical purpose of educating people about a type of domestic violence that was rarely discussed or understood. The book included detailed information about how Rivera's documentation had built the case that saved my life, providing a template for other healthcare providers who might encounter suspicious patterns in their patient interaction. His willingness to investigate potential criminal activity, despite personal and professional risks, had been crucial for exposing Hannah's systematic murder attempts. David's proposal story became part of our wedding narrative, but we always emphasized Rivera's heroic intervention rather than Hannah's attempted sabotage. The focus on positive elements of our survival story helped family and friends celebrate our relationship without becoming overwhelmed by the trauma that had preceded our engagement. The pharmaceutical companies whose medications Hannah had manipulated implemented new packaging and labeling systems designed to make tampering more difficult to accomplish and easier to detect. Her case had demonstrated vulnerabilities in standard medication security that could be exploited by people with basic medical knowledge and access to patients' medication supplies. My parents eventually established a scholarship fund in my name at Rivera's alma mater, supporting pharmacy students who demonstrated exceptional commitment to patient safety and ethical practice. The scholarship honored the professional integrity that had saved their daughter's life while providing positive legacy from the trauma Hannah had inflicted on our family. The detective who had investigated Hannah's case, Sarah Chen, was promoted based partly on her skillful handling of the pharmaceutical manipulation evidence and her coordination with medical professionals during the investigation. Her experience with my case influenced her approach to other suspected medical abuse situations, leading to additional convictions in similar cases. 4 years after the trial, Hannah was denied parole at her first hearing, with the parole board citing her lack of genuine remorse and the sophisticated nature of her crimes as evidence that she continued to pose a significant danger to public safety. Her clinical approach to attempted murder and manipulative communication patterns suggested that rehabilitation had not occurred during her imprisonment. The medical monitoring systems David and I established for managing my cardiac condition became a model for other couples dealing with chronic health conditions that required family involvement in medical care. Our protocols balanced necessary support with protective measures against potential manipulation, acknowledging that trust must be verified through transparent communication and independent confirmation. My speaking engagements at medical conferences evolved into a consulting practice, helping healthcare institutions develop policies for detecting and preventing medical abuse within family relationships. The intersection of domestic violence and pharmaceutical manipulation required specialized training that few medical professionals had received during their educational program. Rivera's pharmacy, which had been crucial evidence in Hannah's conviction, was used in training programs for pharmacists across the country. The visual documentation of her suspicious research behavior provided clear examples of the warning signs that pharmacy professionals should monitor in their patient interaction. Rivera's pharmacy became a destination for medical professionals studying pharmaceutical security and patient protection protocol. His willingness to share his experience and documentation methods helped establish new industry standards for preventing medication tampering and detecting suspicious patterns in prescription management requirements. The anniversary of my first cardiac episode, which we now knew had been Hannah's first serious attempt to murder me, became a celebration of survival and healing rather than a reminder of trauma. David and I marked the date by volunteering at cardiac rehabilitation programs, helping other patients navigate the complex emotions surrounding chronic medical conditions and family support systems. 5 years after Hannah's conviction, I received notification that she had died in prison from complications related to a cardiac condition she had developed during incarceration. The irony of her death from heart problems after attempting to murder me through cardiac manipulation felt like a form of cosmic justice that provided unexpected closure to the trauma she had inflicted. Her death eliminated any possibility of future parole or contact attempts, providing permanent security from further manipulation while allowing me to process the complex emotions surrounding forgiveness, justice, and family loyalty. The knowledge that Hannah could never again threaten anyone's medical safety brought relief that I hadn't expected to feel so profoundly. The foundation David and I established in honor of Dr. Rivera's heroic intervention provides grants for pharmacists pursuing advanced training in medication security and criminal detection techniques. Our goal is ensuring that other families facing medical manipulation will have healthcare advocates capable of recognizing suspicious patterns and documenting evidence necessary for protection and prosecution. Today, my cardiac condition remains stable and well managed through legitimate medical care that I can trust completely because of the verification systems David and I maintain with our healthcare provider. The contrast between authentic medical support and systematic sabotage serves as a daily reminder of how precious and fragile trust can be in relationships that involve life and death decision-making. The lessons learned from surviving Hannah's systematic attempts to murder me through pharmaceutical manipulation continue influencing how David and I approach relationships, medical care, and family dynamics. We've learned that trust must be earned through consistent, transparent behavior rather than assumed based on family relationships or professional credentials. Our marriage is built on communication patterns that prioritize verification and accountability alongside love and support. Rivera remains a close friend and trusted advisor, someone whose professional integrity and personal courage saved my life when my own family member was trying to end. His example demonstrates how individual healthcare providers can make the difference between life and death for patients who don't even realize they're being systematically poisoned by the people they trust most completely. The story of my survival has become a testament to the power of vigilant healthcare providers, the importance of documentation in detecting crimes, and the possibility of healing from even the most profound betrayals of family trust. While Hannah's attempts to murder me through medical manipulation nearly succeeded, the intervention of one observant pharmacist proved that evil can be defeated when good people are willing to investigate suspicious patterns and take action to protect vulnerable individuals. Our journey from systematic poisoning to healing and justice demonstrates that even the most calculating criminal plans can be exposed through careful observation, professional integrity, and the courage to investigate uncomfortable truths about trusted relationships. The pharmaceutical manipulation that nearly killed me ultimately led to legal precedents, medical protocols, and educational programs that will protect countless other families from similar crimes in the future. The morning Detective Chen called to inform me that additional evidence had been discovered in Hannah's dormitory room. I was sitting in my kitchen drinking coffee from the same mug I'd used the day she first poisoned me. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was finally safe to drink from my own dishes without fear while Hannah's world was crumbling around the lies she'd constructed so carefully. The search warrant had uncovered journals, financial records, and research materials that painted an even more disturbing picture of her systematic planning and cold calculation. Hannah had been keeping detailed records of her poisoning attempts, documenting my reactions, adjusting dosages, and planning future escalations with the same clinical precision she applied to her nursing assignment. The journals revealed that she had been researching my murder for over a year before the first cardiac episode, using library resources and medical databases to study pharmaceutical combinations that would create untraceable cardiac events. Her handwriting filled pages with medication names, dosage calculations, and timeline projections for achieving what she called optimal therapeutic outcomes. The financial records showed that Hannah had been living far beyond her means, accumulating debts that would have been impossible to repay through legitimate employment after graduation. She had taken cash advances on multiple credit cards, borrowed money from classmates, and even sold some of her medical textbooks to fund a lifestyle that included expensive clothes, restaurant meals, and weekend trips that she documented extensively on social media. The contrast between her public image of dedicated student and private reality of financial desperation provided clear motive for viewing my death as a solution to her problems. But perhaps most chilling were the research materials Detective Chen described during our meeting at the district attorney's office. Hannah had printed hundreds of pages of medical literature about cardiac drug interactions, toxic reactions, and lethal dosage calculation. She had created spreadsheets comparing different pharmaceutical approaches to inducing cardiac arrest, rating them based on detectability, timing, and likelihood of success. Her academic approach to planning my murder was more thorough than many of her actual nursing assignments. The investigation had also revealed that Hannah had been monitoring my social media accounts and email communications, tracking my activities and relationships to identify optimal timing for her poisoning attempt. She knew when I had important work deadlines, social events, or medical appointments that would create natural explanations for stress-related cardiac episodes. Her selection of the engagement dinner as a poisoning opportunity had been calculated based on her knowledge of David's proposal plans and her understanding of how emotional excitement could mask the symptoms of pharmaceutical manipulation. District Attorney Michael Thompson explained that the evidence supported additional charges beyond the attempted murder counts Hannah was already facing. Her systematic research and documentation demonstrated premeditation that warranted enhanced penalties, while her exploitation of medical knowledge for criminal purposes represented a violation of professional ethics that would influence sentencing recommendations. The comprehensive nature of her planning suggested that she would have continued escalating her attempts until she achieved my death or was stopped by outside intervention. The psychological evaluation ordered by the court revealed personality traits that explained Hannah's ability to maintain her caring facade while systematically poisoning me. Rachel Martinez, the forensic psychologist who evaluated Hannah, described her as having narcissistic personality disorder with antisocial features, a combination that enabled her to view other people as objects to be manipulated rather than individuals deserving of empathy or consideration. Her apparent devotion to my medical care had been performance designed to maintain access and control rather than genuine concern for my well-being. Martinez's report noted that Hannah showed no physiological signs of stress or guilt when discussing her poisoning attempts, suggesting that she viewed the systematic murder plan as a problem-solving exercise rather than a moral transgression. Her emotional responses were calibrated for social appropriateness rather than reflecting authentic feelings about the harm she was inflicting. The evaluation concluded that Hannah posed a significant ongoing danger to anyone who might interfere with her goals or provide opportunities for financial gain. The nursing school's internal investigation uncovered additional evidence of Hannah's manipulation and deception within the academic environment. Several classmates reported that she had asked unusual questions about medication interactions and patient monitoring that seemed unrelated to coursework requirements. She had requested access to restricted medical databases for what she claimed were research projects, but the queries she conducted focused on pharmaceutical toxicology rather than therapeutic application. Her professors had noticed her exceptional interest in cardiac emergencies and resuscitation protocols, but had attributed this focus to legitimate career interests rather than criminal planning. The school's investigation also revealed that Hannah had been stealing supplies from the medical laboratory, including syringes, measurement tools, and even small quantities of medications used for teaching purposes. She had convinced supervisors that she needed extra materials for independent study projects, but the stolen items corresponded precisely with the equipment found in her dormitory room and my apartment. Her theft had been systematic and sustained, demonstrating the same calculating approach she applied to planning my murder. When Hannah's case went to trial, the prosecution presented evidence that revealed the full scope of her deception and manipulation. The pharmaceutical combinations she had created required sophisticated knowledge of drug interactions and cardiac physiology that went far beyond standard nursing curricula. Expert witnesses testified that her poisoning methods demonstrated an advanced understanding of how to create life-threatening medical emergencies, while avoiding detection through standard hospital testing protocols. Dr. Rivera's testimony was particularly devastating, as he walked the jury through months of documentation showing Hannah's suspicious behavior and unusual questions about cardiac medication. His security camera footage showed her researching drug interactions on her phone while waiting for prescriptions, taking photographs of medication bottles, and asking detailed questions about storage requirements and expiration dates that seemed unrelated to normal patient education needs. His professional observations provided crucial evidence of her systematic research and planning. The prosecution also presented testimony from David about Hannah's manipulation of our relationship and her encouragement of activities that would provide cover for poisoning attempts. Her enthusiasm about romantic milestones and social events had been calculated to create opportunities for more dramatic cardiac episodes that would be attributed to emotional excitement rather than pharmaceutical manipulation. Her involvement in planning our engagement dinner had been designed to orchestrate the perfect setting for what she hoped would be a fatal cardiac event. My parents' testimony was heartbreaking, as they described their pride in Hannah's academic achievements and their gratitude for her dedication to my medical care. They had encouraged her involvement in my healthcare decisions and praised her knowledge of cardiac conditions to friends and family members. Their trust in her medical expertise had provided perfect cover for her systematic poisoning, while their emotional support had enabled her to maintain the facade of devoted sister while planning my murder. The defense team attempted to argue that Hannah's actions were the result of mental illness and academic pressure rather than calculated criminal intent,
but the evidence of systematic planning and financial motivation undermined claims of impaired judgment or emotional disturbance. Her detailed documentation of poisoning attempts, combined with her research into my financial affairs and insurance policies, demonstrated clear awareness of her actions and their intended consequences. Expert testimony from Dr. Martinez, the forensic psychologist, explained that Hannah's personality disorder enabled her to compartmentalize her criminal behavior while maintaining normal social functioning in other areas of her life. Her ability to excel academically while planning systematic murder reflected sophisticated cognitive abilities rather than mental impairment. The evaluation concluded that she was fully competent to understand the nature of her actions and their legal consequences. The trial lasted 3 weeks, with testimony from over 40 witnesses including medical professionals, law enforcement officers, family members, and Hannah's classmates and professors. The evidence presented painted a comprehensive picture of systematic deception, financial desperation, and calculated manipulation that had nearly resulted in my death through pharmaceutical poisoning. The prosecution's case was methodical and overwhelming, leaving little doubt about Hannah's guilt or the premeditated nature of her crimes. Hannah herself testified in her own defense, maintaining her innocence despite the overwhelming evidence against her. Her testimony revealed the same manipulative communication patterns that had characterized her interactions with family members and medical professionals.
She attempted to portray herself as a victim of circumstances, claiming that her research into cardiac medications was purely academic, and that any appearance of suspicious behavior was misunderstood or taken out of context. But her testimony also revealed the calculating mindset that had enabled her to plan and execute systematic poisoning attempts. She discussed my medical condition with clinical detachment, describing my cardiac episodes as educational opportunities rather than traumatic experiences. Her lack of emotional response to testimony about my suffering demonstrated the absence of empathy that had made her murder attempts possible. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges, including multiple counts of attempted murder, pharmaceutical tampering, theft of medical supplies, fraud, and conspiracy. The evidence was so comprehensive and Hannah's behavior so clearly documented that even her defense team seemed unsurprised by the unanimous guilty verdict. The judge scheduled sentencing for the following month, allowing time for victim impact statements and additional evidence about Hannah's character and the harm she had caused. The sentencing hearing provided an opportunity for me to address Hannah directly about the impact of her systematic betrayal and attempted murder. Standing at the podium in the courtroom where her fate would be decided, I looked directly at the sister who had tried to kill me while pretending to care for my medical needs. Her expression remained impassive, showing no signs of remorse or acknowledgement of the trauma she had inflicted through months of calculated poisoning. I described the physical agony of repeated cardiac episodes, the terror of feeling my heart race out of control, and the helplessness of trusting someone completely while they used that trust to slowly murder me. I explained how her betrayal had damaged my ability to trust medical professionals, family members, and even my own body's responses to legitimate medication. The psychological trauma of discovering that every gesture of medical concern had been an opportunity for attempted murder would require years of therapy to fully process. David also provided victim impact testimony, describing how Hannah's manipulation had affected our relationship and her attempt to use our engagement as cover for a fatal poisoning. His emotional statement about the terror of watching me suffer while trusting the very person who was causing my medical emergencies moved several jury members to tears. He emphasized that Hannah's actions had violated not just my physical safety but the fundamental trust that makes family relationships possible. My parents' victim impact statement was perhaps the most devastating, as they described their grief for the daughter they thought they had raised, and their horror at discovering how she had perverted their pride in her academic achievement. They had encouraged Hannah's involvement in my medical care and praised her dedication to nursing education, never imagining that she was using their support to facilitate systematic attempted murder. Their statement emphasized that Hannah's betrayal had destroyed their ability to trust their own judgment about their children's character and motivations. Dr. Rivera also provided testimony about the broader impact of Hannah's crimes on the medical community and the pharmacy profession. Her case had demonstrated vulnerabilities in pharmaceutical security that required enhanced monitoring and documentation procedure. The trust that patients place in healthcare providers and family members who manage their medications had been violated in ways that would affect how medical professionals approached patient safety and family involvement in healthcare decisions. The judge's sentencing statement emphasized the particularly heinous nature of Hannah's crimes, noting that she had weaponized medical knowledge and family trust to commit attempted murder. Her systematic approach to pharmaceutical poisoning demonstrated sophisticated planning and calculating disregard for human life that warranted the maximum penalties available under law. The judge sentenced Hannah to life in prison without possibility of parole, ensuring that she would never again have the opportunity to harm patients or exploit medical knowledge for criminal purposes. Hannah's reaction to the life sentence was characteristic of her emotional detachment throughout the trial. She showed no visible response to the judge's words, maintaining the same clinical composure she had displayed during testimony about her systematic poisoning attempt. Her lack of emotional reaction reinforced the psychological evaluation findings about her inability to experience appropriate guilt or remorse for the harm she had inflicted. The courtroom was packed with nursing students, medical professionals, and family members who had followed the case closely. Many expressed relief that Hannah would never have the opportunity to complete her nursing education or gain access to vulnerable patients. Her case had become a cautionary tale about how medical education could be perverted for criminal purposes, leading to enhanced screening and monitoring procedures in healthcare training programs. After the sentencing, Detective Chen explained that Hannah's case had established important legal precedents for prosecuting pharmaceutical manipulation and medical abuse within family relationships. The comprehensive evidence and successful prosecution would serve as a model for investigating similar crimes and protecting vulnerable patients from exploitation by trusted caregivers. Law enforcement agencies across the country were studying the case to develop better protocols for detecting and prosecuting medical abuse. The aftermath of Hannah's sentencing brought mixed emotions of relief, grief, and ongoing trauma that would require years to fully process. While justice had been served and she could never again threaten my safety, the psychological impact of her systematic betrayal continued affecting every aspect of my recovery and relationship. The knowledge that someone I had trusted completely with my life had been systematically trying to end it created trauma that extended far beyond the physical effects of her poisoning. The media attention surrounding Hannah's case attracted interest from documentary filmmakers, journalists, and medical professionals studying pharmaceutical abuse and family violence. Her systematic approach to attempted murder through medical manipulation represented a new category of domestic violence that required specialized understanding and prevention strategy. The educational value of her case was significant, but the ongoing media coverage also created additional stress for our family as we tried to heal from her betrayal. The civil litigation against Hannah's estate proceeded parallel to the criminal case, seeking financial compensation for the medical expenses, emotional trauma, and ongoing treatment costs resulting from her systematic poisoning. While monetary damages could never fully compensate for the harm she had inflicted, the civil case established important precedents for holding perpetrators of medical abuse financially accountable for their actions. The insurance investigation revealed that Hannah had been researching my policies and beneficiary arrangements with the same systematic attention she applied to pharmaceutical research. Her interest in my financial affairs had extended beyond simple inheritance speculation to detailed analysis of how my death would impact her own financial situation. The investigation found evidence that she had been planning to use my life insurance proceeds to pay for graduate school and establish the lifestyle she wanted after completing her nursing education. The nursing school's response to Hannah's conviction included comprehensive review of their admission procedures, student monitoring protocols, and access to medical information and supply. Her case demonstrated how someone with criminal intent could exploit educational resources and institutional trust to develop sophisticated methods for harming patients. The school implemented new safeguards designed to prevent similar exploitation while maintaining appropriate educational opportunities for legitimate students. The pharmaceutical companies whose medications Hannah had manipulated implemented enhanced security measures for their products, including tamper-evident packaging and tracking systems designed to detect unauthorized access or modification. Her case had revealed vulnerabilities in standard medication security that could be exploited by individuals with basic medical knowledge and access to patients' medication supply. The ongoing impact of Hannah's crimes extended beyond immediate family members to include friends, classmates, and medical professionals who had been deceived by her carefully constructed facade of caring dedication. Many people who had praised her commitment to my medical care struggled with guilt about missing warning signs or enabling her access to information and resources that facilitated her systematic poisoning attempt. The support groups I attended for survivors of family violence included increasing numbers of people who had experienced medical abuse, though few had encountered the level of systematic pharmaceutical manipulation that Hannah had implemented. These connections provided valuable perspective on the broader patterns of how trusted relationships could be weaponized for harmful purposes, while also demonstrating the importance of professional intervention in detecting and stopping such crime. The book I began writing about my experience surviving systematic pharmaceutical poisoning became a comprehensive guide for families dealing with chronic medical conditions and the potential for exploitation by trusted caregivers. The writing process was therapeutic while serving the practical purpose of educating people about warning signs and protective measures that could prevent similar crime. Hannah's case study became required reading in medical ethics courses, pharmacy programs, and criminal justice curricula across the country. Her systematic approach to attempted murder through pharmaceutical manipulation provided important lessons about how professional knowledge could be perverted for criminal purposes and the importance of institutional safeguards to protect vulnerable patients from exploitation by trusted individuals. The legacy of Hannah's crimes and conviction continues influencing how medical professionals, law enforcement agencies, and families approach the intersection of healthcare and personal relationships. While her attempts to murder me through systematic poisoning nearly succeeded, the intervention of observant healthcare providers and comprehensive investigation ultimately led to justice and important changes in how society protects vulnerable patients from exploitation by those they trust most completely. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning exactly 2 years after Hannah's sentencing, delivered by a correctional facility courier who waited while I signed for the certified mail with trembling hands. I recognized her handwriting immediately, the same precise script that had labeled my medication organizers and documented my symptoms while she systematically poisoned me. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, weighted with implications I wasn't ready to confront. Inside was a single sheet of prison stationery covered in Hannah's familiar medical-style documentation, but instead of tracking my cardiac episodes, she was chronicling her own declining health behind bars. She described chest pains, irregular heartbeats, and episodes of breathlessness that prison medical staff dismissed as anxiety or melancholy. The irony was devastating and perfect. Hannah was experiencing the same cardiac symptoms she had artificially created in me, except hers were apparently genuine and going untreated. Her letter didn't contain the apology I had expected, nor the manipulation I had feared. Instead, it read like a clinical case study of her own condition, complete with medical terminology and symptom progression charts that demonstrated she was still thinking like the nurse she had trained to become. She wrote about inadequate prison health care, delayed diagnostic testing, and medication rationing that left her feeling helpless and afraid. The woman who had controlled every aspect of my medical care was now completely dependent on an indifferent system that seemed determined to ignore her suffering. What struck me most was the absence of any acknowledgement of the connection between her current medical vulnerability and what she had done to me. She wrote about her cardiac symptoms as if they were random medical misfortune rather than cosmic justice. Her detailed descriptions of chest pain and racing heartbeats were identical to the suffering she had deliberately inflicted on me, but she showed no awareness of the parallel or irony in her situation. David found me sitting at the kitchen table staring at the letter with tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness or pity for Hannah, but tears of rage that she could document her own medical suffering with such clinical precision while never acknowledging the identical pain she had caused me through systematic poisoning. Her ability to compartmentalize her experience as a patient from her crimes as a perpetrator demonstrated the same emotional detachment that had enabled her to attempt murder while playing the role of caring sister. I decided not to respond to Hannah's letter, recognizing that any communication would likely encourage additional contact attempts and potentially provide her with emotional manipulation opportunity. The letter itself felt like another form of manipulation designed to generate sympathy or perhaps extract medical advice about her condition. Her request for information about cardiac specialist and treatment options seemed particularly audacious, given that she had tried to kill me through pharmaceutical manipulation of the same organ system. 6 months later, I received notification from the Department of Corrections that Hannah had died during the night from complications related to cardiac arrhythmia and respiratory failure. The prison medical examiner determined that her death was due to natural causes, specifically an undiagnosed congenital heart defect that had been exacerbated by stress and inadequate medical care. The official cause of death was remarkably similar to what mine would have been if her poisoning attempts had succeeded. The news of Hannah's death created complex emotions that I struggled to process even with extensive therapy. Relief was the predominant feeling, knowing that she could never again threaten my safety or attempt to contact me with manipulative communication. But the relief was complicated by grief for the sister I had thought she was, the person I had loved and trusted completely before discovering her true nature. The funeral arrangements fell to my parents, who chose a small private service without notifying extended family or Hannah's former classmates. They struggled with how to honor their daughter's memory while acknowledging the crimes she had committed and the harm she had inflicted on their other child. The service focused on her early years and academic achievements, carefully avoiding any mention of her nursing education or her systematic attempts to murder. I chose not to attend Hannah's funeral, recognizing that my presence would complicate an already difficult situation for my parents and potentially create media attention that would be harmful for everyone involved. Instead, David and I spent that day volunteering at a cardiac rehabilitation center, helping other patients navigate the emotional challenges of recovering from heart-related medical emergencies. The activity felt more meaningful than mourning someone who had tried to kill me. The estate settlement revealed the full extent of Hannah's financial desperation and the debts that had motivated her murder attempts. Even with my life insurance proceeds, she would have struggled to maintain the lifestyle she wanted while paying for graduate school and living expenses. Her financial planning had been as unrealistic as her pharmaceutical manipulation had been sophisticated, suggesting that desperation rather than greed had been her primary motivation. The medical examiner's report on Hannah's death included recommendations for improved cardiac screening in correctional facilities, noting that her condition might have been treatable with proper diagnostic testing and medication management. The irony that she died from neglect of the same organ system she had systematically attacked in me was not lost on medical professionals who had followed her case. Rivera attended a memorial service we organized for the anniversary of his intervention that had saved my life, bringing together the medical professionals, law enforcement officers and family members who had been involved in exposing Hannah's crime. The event celebrated the power of professional vigilance and ethical practice in protecting vulnerable patients from exploitation by trusted individuals. The foundation David and I established in Dr. Rivera's honor had grown to support pharmaceutical security research, victim advocacy programs, and educational initiatives designed to prevent medical abuse within family relationships. Our work focused on training healthcare providers to recognize suspicious patterns and providing resources for families dealing with chronic conditions that required caregiver involvement in medication management. The book I published about surviving systematic pharmaceutical poisoning became required reading in medical ethics courses and was translated into multiple languages for international distribution. The educational value of my experience helped healthcare providers understand how medical knowledge could be weaponized and what safeguards were necessary to protect vulnerable patients from exploitation by trusted caregivers. Speaking engagements took me across the country to medical conferences, law enforcement training programs, and victim advocacy organizations, where I shared the lessons learned from surviving Hannah's systematic betrayal. These presentations were emotionally challenging but felt necessary for preventing similar crimes against other families dealing with chronic medical conditions and caregiver relationships. The legal precedents established by Hannah's case influenced prosecution strategies in other instances of medical abuse and pharmaceutical manipulation. Law enforcement agencies developed enhanced protocols for investigating suspected medication tampering, while medical professionals implemented improved documentation and monitoring procedures for patients whose care involved family member or caregiver participation. My cardiac condition remained stable and well managed through legitimate medical care that I could trust completely because of the verification systems David and I maintained with our healthcare provider. The contrast between authentic medical support and systematic sabotage served as a daily reminder of how precious and fragile trust could be in relationships involving life and death decision-making. The marriage David and I built was founded on transparency, communication, and mutual respect rather than the calculated manipulation that had characterized Hannah's relationship. Our approach to healthcare decisions involved multiple verification steps and independent confirmations that balanced necessary support with protective measures against potential manipulation or misunderstanding. The neighborhood pharmacy where Dr. Rivera worked became a training center for pharmaceutical security and patient protection, with his case study methods taught to pharmacists nationwide. His willingness to investigate suspicious patterns and document potential criminal activity had saved my life while establishing important professional standards for protecting vulnerable patients from exploitation. The medical monitoring systems we developed for managing chronic conditions became models for other couples dealing with health challenges that required family involvement in treatment decisions. Our protocols demonstrated how love and support could coexist with verification and accountability, creating safer environments for patients who needed assistance with complex medication regimens. The nursing school that Hannah had attended implemented comprehensive reforms based on her case, including enhanced psychological screening, ethics training, and monitoring of student access to medical information and supply. Her exploitation of educational resources for criminal purposes led to industry-wide changes in how healthcare training programs balanced educational access with patient safety concerns. The consulting practice I developed helped healthcare institutions create policies for detecting and preventing medical abuse within family relationships. The intersection of domestic violence and pharmaceutical manipulation required specialized training that few medical professionals had received during their educational programs, creating demand for expertise based on real-world experience with systematic medical abuse. 3 years after Hannah's death, I testified before a congressional committee considering federal legislation to enhance penalties for medication tampering and medical abuse within families. The legal framework for prosecuting pharmaceutical manipulation needed strengthening to address the sophistication of methods being used and the vulnerability of patients who depended on family members for medical care. The security systems Dr. Rivera had implemented in his pharmacy were adopted by pharmacies nationwide, creating standardized protocols for documenting patient interactions and identifying suspicious requests for medication information. His comprehensive approach to pharmaceutical security had prevented additional crimes while establishing professional standards that protected patients from exploitation by trusted individuals. The support groups I facilitated for survivors of family violence included increasing numbers of people who had experienced medical abuse, creating community resources for addressing the unique trauma associated with having healthcare relationships violated by trusted family members. These connections provided validation and healing opportunities that weren't available through traditional domestic violence services. The scholarship fund my parents established in my name supported pharmacy students who demonstrated exceptional commitment to patient safety and ethical practice. The scholarship honored the professional integrity that had saved my life while providing positive legacy from the trauma Hannah had inflicted on our family through her systematic betrayal and attempted murder. 5 years after Hannah's conviction, the documentary about my case premiered at film festivals across the country, bringing national attention to the issue of medical abuse within family relationships. The film focused on Dr. Rivera's heroic intervention and the importance of professional vigilance in protecting vulnerable patients, rather than sensationalizing the criminal aspects of Hannah's systematic poisoning attempt. The legislative changes prompted by Hannah's case included enhanced penalties for medication tampering, improved reporting requirements for suspicious pharmaceutical activities, and funding for training programs designed to help healthcare providers recognize and respond to potential medical abuse. These reforms created stronger protections for patients while providing clearer guidelines for professionals who suspected criminal activity. The research conducted using data from Hannah's case contributed to scientific literature about pharmaceutical manipulation, victim psychology, and the intersection of medical knowledge with criminal behavior. Academic institutions studying domestic violence, medical ethics, and criminal justice incorporated her case into curricula designed to prepare
future professionals for detecting and preventing similar crimes. The anniversary of Dr. Rivera's intervention became an annual celebration of professional integrity and patient advocacy, bringing together healthcare providers, law enforcement officers, and survivors of medical abuse. The event honored those who had the courage to investigate suspicious patterns and take action to protect vulnerable individuals from exploitation by trusted caregivers. Today, my life is defined by healing, advocacy, and the meaningful relationships built on genuine trust rather than calculated manipulation. The trauma of surviving systematic pharmaceutical poisoning has been transformed into purpose through educational work, victim advocacy, and the prevention programs designed to protect other families from similar crimes. The foundation David and I built continues expanding its reach, supporting research into pharmaceutical security, training programs for healthcare providers, and resources for families dealing with medical abuse. Our work demonstrates how devastating personal experiences can be transformed into positive change that protects others from similar harm. The lessons learned from surviving Hannah's systematic betrayal continue influencing how I approach relationships, medical care, and family dynamics. Trust must be earned through consistent, transparent behavior rather than assumed based on family relationships or professional credentials. Verification and accountability are expressions of love rather than indicators of suspicion when dealing with life and death healthcare decisions. Dr. Rivera remains a close friend and trusted advisor, someone whose professional courage and ethical integrity saved my life when my own family member was systematically trying to end it. His example demonstrates how individual healthcare providers can make the difference between life and death for patients who don't realize they're being exploited by the people they trust most completely. The story of my survival has become a testament to the power of vigilant healthcare providers, the importance of documentation in detecting crimes, and the possibility of healing from even the most profound betrayals of family trust. While Hannah's attempts to murder me through medical manipulation nearly succeeded, the intervention of one observant pharmacist proved that evil can be defeated when good people are willing to investigate uncomfortable truths and take action to protect vulnerable individuals. Our journey from systematic poisoning to healing and justice demonstrates that even the most calculating criminal plans can be exposed through careful observation, professional integrity, and the courage to confront difficult realities about trusted relationships. The pharmaceutical manipulation that nearly killed me ultimately led to legal precedents, medical protocols, and educational programs that will protect countless other families from similar crimes in the future. The memory of Hannah's betrayal serves as a reminder that trust is precious and must be protected through verification, communication, and accountability. But it also demonstrates that healing is possible, that justice can prevail, and that even the most devastating experiences can be transformed into meaningful work that protects others from similar harm. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.